on this date, a little less than a month out from the date on which we promised a reassessment to our families, to staff, on what the next steps would be in terms of how we're educating students. And so I wanted to, at this point, offer the school committee some thoughts and a proposal for how I believe we should move forward. I plan to do so tonight. It is a very high-level proposal at this point. And the hope is that we would revisit this proposal. You can ask questions now. There'll be time, between tonight and the next school committee meeting on the 12th for you to do any research or, hear feedback from, any constituents or staff or students as you may seek to. And then I would hope that the school committee would weigh in more formally on the 12th of November. And so just quickly, 3 things that I intend to do. One second here. I'm going to, make a proposal ultimately, as I just said, for the model that I believe is most appropriate for both quarters 2 and 3 of the school year. I'm going to share a little bit about the context in which the proposal is being made, talk about the factors considered in making the proposal, and then I want to, of course, say a little bit, but at a high level, about what the actual proposal is. As was the case this summer, we're making a conscious effort to make decisions, giving time for family and staff to prepare accordingly. Admittedly, doing so presents a challenge as we continue to experience, I think, what all would define as a very fluid and changing context. Nonetheless, it is believed that this proposal embraces and reflects a commitment to safety as well as our core values. Just by way of reminder, our task this past summer was to develop 3 plans, one for in-person learning with safety requirements, a hybrid model, and then one for remote learning, where students would learn exclusively from home. We did so, and a full report on these plans still sits in the Reopening Safely space on our website. You'll recall that in early August, upon the release of this metric, we made a decision to proceed with a model where all Lynn Public School students would learn remotely. At that time, the time of the release of this metric, we were approximately 3 times over the threshold, indicating a point at which a district should leverage the remote model. Making the decision at that point, early August, allowed time for families to plan and time for us as the district leadership and staff to plan and focus squarely on providing a robust learning model, as robust a learning model as possible. Our work is always done within a context to which we must pay attention. Each day, as I know all school committee members do, I receive an email with this graphic on it, which shares or outlines the statistics in the city of Lynn in the past 24 hours. This graphic in this slide represents the dashboard and data released yesterday. As I've said before, for me, it's a daily reminder of the loss and the impact felt and experienced in our city. Beyond the day-to-day data, we also keep close watch on the 14-day data, which is now released on Thursday afternoons. As a matter of fact, about 2 hours ago, the latest 14-day average data was released, and I can speak to that if you like when we get to the questions portion. You can see here that the decision to go full remote shortly after the July 29th release of data reflects a position very similar to that in which we find ourselves now. Since the release of the color-coded metric, Lynn has been in the red, a position where remote learning is recommended. The city has seen a reduction in positive cases, particularly during the month of September and in the early weeks of October. We've not yet seen a reduction to the point of moving out of the red category, and as of late, there's been a surge in positive cases, as we all know, in the city as well as nationally. As you might imagine, much of our attention has been focused on continuing to build a strong model for remote learning. At the same time, state authorities continue to evolve policy and recommendations as the understanding of COVID-19 evolves. Accordingly, districts that are in the red are not necessarily required to shift to remote learning. Instead, it's a recommendation that comes with a suggestion to weigh along with other factors in a final decision. As recently as Tuesday, the commissioner made clear that certain protocols in schools may not be as necessary as originally thought. This includes practice such as suspending in-person learning for deep cleaning days. Further, the data clearly indicates that while there's a surge in positive cases in the state and beyond, there's little evidence to suggest that in-person learning has contributed to that surge. Districts who are providing in-person learning and communities that shift to the red category as a result of surge in cases are encouraged to continue providing in-person learning. This recommendation is drawn upon the experience locally and internationally in countries such as France, Germany, and Ireland, where restrictions are being put in place as I speak in communities to limit the spread during the surge, yet schools are remaining open for in-person services. I say this only to share that, only to underscore, that the thinking continues to evolve on what education can and should look like in this context. Regardless of the context, our work and ongoing planning remains anchored in the same philosophical foundation, the same one that we've employed since the month of March. We want to first tend to the hierarchy of need, to physical and mental health of each student and staff member, as well as food security and housing stability. A close second is creating optimal learning conditions for students. We know that there was loss resulting from last spring, and thus we want to continue to build a robust program for accelerating learning. And then finally, we want to ensure clear and frequent communication, which is now done in large part, in school-based communication, but also through district communications, virtual town halls, and the like. With that philosophical foundation, we've established a practical foundation for launching the school year. This includes practice with safety protocols on site with staff, countless hours of professional learning and planning, procuring and distributing the tools, technology tools, and ensuring that the critical pieces of the hierarchy of need are in place, such as the meal distribution. We've continued to solidify supports for our students and families. These come in the form of online tutorials and videos, social and emotional supports at every school, and the recently launched Learning Support Center, where we are providing voluntary after-school supports for high-need special education students. Here, I need to acknowledge that the staff's hard work is paying dividends as it relates to some of the critical benchmarks. First, from a safety standpoint, there are no known transmissions of coronavirus on site among LPS staff. We continue to ensure that students have the tools to access learning, and at present, 93% of students have a device from the district. 96% of our students have signed on to Schoology. The goal is still 100%. and the average daily attendance is approaching our goal of 95%. Here, I just briefly want to highlight the recently launched Learning Support Centers. This after-school program for some of our high-needs special education students is providing much-needed supports that are extremely difficult to deliver through virtual platforms. The program runs 4 days a week, 2 hours per day, and students are able to access more meaningfully their related services, and they're also offered academic supports. The program began on Monday, and today marks the third day of the program because it doesn't run on Tuesdays. I'm pleased to announce that the program is going well. Of course, it is taking some time for students to get to a place of comfortability being in the buildings and working with staff. Nonetheless, we see this program as being critical to meeting the needs of these students. As this is our first foray into the realm of personal in-person services this year, we're taking every precaution and providing every support. So far, so good. While we've taken giant steps forward, there's still much work to be done. We're still focusing on professional learning in the areas we believe will support students' social and emotional needs first and foremost, and enhance and improve their learning experience. This includes, but is not limited to, more asynchronous or independent learning activities to decrease screen time. The implementation of a mechanism to know more about where students are in terms of skill and content in English and math, and better, more seamless means to communicate with them. Further, as I've been messaging since the very beginning, remote learning is very, very challenging for particular groups of students. We continue to shift our efforts to meet their needs. We are still working. Now, the principals and directors have seen this slide in previous meetings. I use it to characterize and frame our work and planning. Inasmuch as we are used to planning for the entire year, we really don't have the ability, nor is it prudent to do so this year. We can only see so far ahead. We've taken the planning by quarter. There's even some danger in doing that, as the quarter typically spans about 3 months. Nonetheless, as I've mentioned in the outset of this presentation, we need to land in a definitive place and communicate a plan so families and staff can plan accordingly. I intend to remain committed to that. Back to our philosophical foundation. Again, this is the place from which thinking, planning, ideas all emanate. However, the best philosophies evolve with time and understanding. We've had 6 weeks to experience remote learning and have done our level best to meet students' needs. We continue to grow and learn and improve our practices. That said, we know full well that there are groups of students for whom the experience will still fall short of fulfilling. This is not because of the lack of effort on behalf of staff and families working in partnership with one another. Simply put, virtual learning does not meet the complex needs of particular groups of students. The best philosophies evolve, and ours needs to as well. I've added to our philosophy that we need to provide appropriate support and services for those whose academic needs we struggle to meet the most in the virtual format. Given the context, which reflects currently a surge in cases in our community and increasing concerns about health and safety, I'm recommending that the district remain in remote learning for Q2, which begins November 23rd and ends February 5th. That said, I'm proposing that we transition to InPerson Supports for students whose academic needs we struggle to meet the most on January 19th, 2021. Looking beyond the second quarter, our thinking is to invite additional groups of students for in-person learning upon 3 weeks of being in the yellow designation, beginning February 1st, which is actually the beginning of the last week of the second quarter. I'll say more about the groups of students about whom I'm referencing in just a second. To be clear, I've chosen January 19th as it is 14 days beyond our return from winter vacation. The medical community has consistently warned about potential surges in the fall months and during the holiday season, which we're seeing right now. It seemed most prudent to propose a start for these during the day services after this period of time. Here, I want to quickly underscore the language used in the Evolved Philosophical Foundation, which is also in the title of this slide. I want to make sure that I'm conveying that the challenge here is not these groups of students. It's our ability to meet their needs in the virtual format. With respect to the 5 programs identified here and the students therein, we've struggled mightily to meet their needs for a myriad of reasons. Generally speaking, the computer or tablet, while powerful tools for learning, are not universally effective or applicable. Further, the virtual platform makes related services, particularly occupational therapy and physical therapy, exceptionally difficult. Remote learning requires a much more involved role for parents. While we continue to train and equip parents, the effort is not translating to the kinds of outcomes that we would like for these groups of students to experience. And in some cases, regression is not just possible, it is probable. It should be noted that in some cases, the depth of the struggle results in poor attendance in virtual sessions. Case in point, students in the coach program at Shoemaker attend at a rate roughly 10% lower than the district average daily attendance rate. The other group that I propose that we invite for in-person service beginning January 19th is students who are identified as having limited or interrupted formal education who are relatively new to the district. This group is our most at risk for dropping out. Here, we seek to provide more robust in-person experience to ensure that this group of students is set up for success by more substantively ensuring that they are able to access social and emotional supports, first and foremost, in addition to supports designed to help them more seamlessly access their classes. I'm proposing an approach now to begin on January 19th, acknowledging that there's work to be done to fine-tune a model. At a high level, I can say that at this point, we would host in-person programming at sites where the programs are currently assigned. I will display the sites and the projected number of students who will receive in-person services in the next slide. Here, I just want to say formally that we need to work closely with the leadership of the schools, the teachers, and the families to determine the most suitable approach. This is a snapshot of an approximation of the number of students who would be receiving in-person services at each site. I am purposely using the descriptor approximation because the numbers could fluctuate one way or another, but it's unlikely that the fluctuation would be large. You will notice that I'm proposing relatively small groups of students at the schools for in-person services. Even in the case of the school with the largest program, the number of students in the program represents about 30% of the total enrollment at that school. And it's possible, if not probable, that not all of the students would be in the program, would be there on the same day. That's a detail we intend to iron out in the coming weeks. Here, I simply want to underscore our ability to accommodate the programs as proposed. Further, if you took each individual school as a standalone program, collectively, the Lynn Public Schools programs would represent one of the smallest in-person service program in the city compared to those offered by our partner agencies. Safety being our foremost concern, we're already developed and practiced on safety protocols with staff in the building. In preparation for the opening of the year, we developed a whole host of DESE-required safety protocols. Further, by way of reminder, we ordered and have in our coffers enough personal protective supplies to accommodate the entire Lynn Public Schools enrollment from September to January. By January, we will still have the experience of other districts who are transitioning to in-person learning, having begun in full remote, to bring to bear on our preparation as it relates to protocol and equally important factor, parent and guardian training. We've done this in preparation for the learning support centers, plan to create a more robust training program for the parents of students in these programs. Finally, we're working with Lynn Community Health to offer a weekly voluntary testing protocol for students and staff. This is still very much in the beta stages, but there's both a willingness and an ability to do so. Related, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is planning to pilot a rapid testing protocol for schools offering in-person services. Essentially, it appears as though this may become a part of how we safely welcome students for in-person learning in the very near future. We've been reaching out to families of the selected programs and have this input thus far. Clearly, there's a willingness and comfortability around in-person learning. Among families who have students in the special education programs, the unwillingness was related to potentially losing a spot in an existing daycare program. As it relates to SLIFE students, it's harder to tell because of the challenge in reaching out and actually connecting with those families. The challenge in connecting with these students underscores the need for us to, quote unquote, lay eyes on these students, for lack of better expression. Needless to say, we are deeply concerned about losing this group of students. Having said that, all of the students with whom we made contact expressed interest in in-person supports. In both cases, any family that chooses to keep a student on a remote learning plan would be accommodated. There are some additional factors around which members should be mindful. The first is the success of the learning programs our partner agencies have launched. I'm in regular contact with the leadership from the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, Campfire, and the like. These programs are providing in-person services largely populated by LPS students. They've done so with a high degree of success since the summer. I've had the opportunity to visit one program, and suffice to say that I can see why the programs are successful. These programs have continued despite the red designation for the city. I see their operations and experience as particularly valuable to our planning for this proposal. Further, we need to begin to warm up to the idea of students on site, first and foremost to provide them the services that they need, but also because of state statute-driven assessment. As of right now, both the Access for English Learners and MCAS assessments are on for this year. Both have to be administered in person. In a call with the commissioner on Tuesday of this week, he made clear that the Secretary of Education will not be granting waivers to states for these assessments this year. Whether or not they'll be used for an accountability determination remains to be seen, but it looks like they will happen. I say this simply to underscore that whether by design or directive, there will be in-person services in the buildings in the coming months. I'm recommending that we remain in remote learning beginning November 23rd, the first day of the second quarter of the school year. I'm proposing that we transition for some in-person learning for groups of students totaling approximately 300, whose needs we struggle to meet the most, beginning January 19th. The next step is to plan. As I mentioned in the presentation, we need to go to the next level of specificity around program days and hours, updating any safety protocols, and training. Additionally, as has been the case since last spring, we will continue to consult with our own nursing department, the city's Board of Health, and Lynn Community Health to ensure that the steps forward are in keeping with the latest thinking around safety and procedure. And finally, we will continue to embrace the philosophical elements tied to communication. We want families to know, we want families to know what we see as the next step and ensure that the supports they need to keep their student learning and growing are in place.